Hello everyone, good morning. Really lovely to see you all. So my name's Kate and I'm here with Vicky. Vicky, if you want to give a wave as well. And we are from the Visits Collective. So we are a group of freelancers who are working with the Q organisation to deliver a series of different learning visits on all sorts of topics. Give me a wave if you've been to a Q learning visit before. So give me a wave if you've been to one before. Okay, quite a few of you. Nice. And give me a wave if this is the first time you've ever been to a Q learning visit. Hey, so an extra special welcome to you guys. Lovely to have you here. So I'll say a little bit about the learning visits. So the visits program that Q run are designed to help people essentially learn about different types of practice that they can take back to their health and care settings. So sometimes we do in-person learning events, sometimes we do them online like this. And yeah, the story of the visit today is that we held an in-person event in November at Leeds Teaching Hospital, all about the improvement method that Leeds use, which you're going to hear lots more about today. And it was a really popular visit, but because it was in person at the hospital, we only had 30 spaces for people to attend. So off the back of that, we wanted to organise a sort of version of that event today online that more people could come to. So what you'll be experiencing today is very similar to the content of what we shared in person at the hospital in November, with some slight sort of tweaks and adaptations to make it work better online. So we're really excited to have you here. There'll be lots of time for you to connect with each other and to think about who you might want to speak to or follow up with. So feel free in breakout rooms to, exchange email addresses or to make connections as serves you. And there are a couple of really practical things to share before we move into some introductions to give you a chance to say hello to each other. The first thing to say is that, as you can see, that we're filming. So we always film our online visits so that people who might be unable to attend last minute can also access the learning resources afterwards. And also for yourselves, if you want to then be able to look back at the visit and kind of revisit what's been covered. Closed captions are enabled on this Zoom event. So if for any reason you want to have the subtitles, you can click closed captions and that should all work fine. And then, Vicky, if you're happy just to flash up the agenda, I'll just briefly share a word about that. Thank you very much. So yeah, we're going to do some introductions and connections. We're going to hear from Jimmy from Leeds Teaching Hospital, who's going to talk a little bit about the Leeds improvement approach. We're then going to watch a video of kind of extracts of one of the talks that we saw in November and have a chance for some discussions. We'll take a break. We'll then hear from Catherine, who leads on education and training at Leeds. We'll then hear from one of the teams who are kind of implementing the Leeds improvement method in action. So we'll hear from the front line how they're embedding that and what that looks like before we have some final reflections and close at 12:30. So there will be a break at about 11:15, but absolutely do what you need to do. If you need to step away from your computer, if you need to get a cup of tea, if you need to have a stretch, please feel free to do that. Remember that we are actual human bodies, underneath our little squares of heads that we can see on the screen. We're real bodies that need to be moved around and stretched. So feel free to do whatever you need. And on that, so there'll be a series of breakout room discussions, as you can see on the agenda, but there is always the option to stay in the main room. So if for any reason, you're not in a space where you want to kind of talk or interact today, or actually you're at a point in the visit where you'd quite like a bit of quiet reflection and to think for yourself, absolutely feel free to do that. So every breakout invitation is optional. Then the last thing to say before we give you a chance to meet each other, if we just ping to the next slide, please, Vicky. Some of you here will be Q members and already be part of the Q community, and some of you will be new to Q and not yet be members. And so that QR code on the screen, if you want to scan that, you can find out more about how to apply to be a Q member. And we'll share that again at the end of the visit as well, but just wanted to flag that now. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Vicky. So let's do some introductions. So we're going to move into some breakout rooms and give you a chance to share with each other who you are, where you are, and what's drawn you to this visit. You know, why have you come along today? What are you hoping to learn? What are you hoping to gain? How does it apply to your own organisational context? So in a moment, Vicky will drop those prompts in the chat. Thank you, Vicky. And then she'll open up the breakout rooms and we'll give you a bit of, I think, have we got 10 minutes for, have I said that right? Don't want to give you false expectations of how long you've got to connect with each other. I think we've got about 10 minutes for you to have a chat with each other, and then we'll bring you back together before we hand over to our first speaker.
Just give me 2 seconds, Kate, because quite a lot of people were still coming in. So I'm just going to rejig and open a sensible number of breakout rooms.
Yeah, that's always the way, isn't it?
Which is quite a lot. So just give me a second.
And I can see in the chat a couple of people are having issues with sound. I'm sorry about that. Absolutely leave and rejoin if that helps. I know sometimes that does. Yeah, that does help. Sometimes Zoom just needs to be woken up and rejigged.
So ready to open rooms if that's okay, Kate?
Yeah, wonderful. Go for it. So enjoy having some introductions with each other and just saying hello and why you're here.
Enjoy everything.
In a minute, we'll spotlight Jimmy, Vicky, if that's all right.
Yeah. Do you want me to spotlight him after you've introduced?
Yeah, perfect. Welcome back, everyone. Ellie, are you dialing in from the train? That is like ultimate commitment. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you had a nice chance to connect with some other people. I know it was brief, but there'll be lots more time in breakout rooms as the visit goes on. And we're going to hand over now to our first speaker, Jimmy. So Jimmy, I'll let you introduce yourself, but Jimmy helped to sort of lead and MC the visit back in November and is going to tell us lots more about the Leeds Improvement Method and a bit of the story, I guess, of the quality improvement method that they're using at the hospital there. So Jimmy, I'm going to pass over to you and just let us know if you want any support with screen sharing or anything like that.
Thanks, Kate. I caught the back end of that because I was a bit late coming back in, but I should be able to share a screen and we'll go.
Yeah, no worries. I was just welcoming you into the stage.
Thank you. So that says it's working my end, so I'm hoping
yeah, we can see that perfectly. All good.
So hello, my name's Jimmy. Yeah, I work for Leeds Teaching Hospitals. I'm professional lead for the Leeds Improvement Method, which essentially means that I'm trying to support the method get out and be used and stay alive in the organisation. So I've got a fairly short presentation, the next sort of 15 minutes or so, and then hopefully some opportunity for people to ask questions. We'll do our best with that, or take them away if we don't know the answer and see if we get something back to you later on it. So I do like to start my presentations with a quiz. So my question is, can you name the cities? Pop it in the chat. Let's not all shout out. Pop it in the chat. Can you name the cities in the picture? And either a bonus point for connecting why they're relevant to what I'm going to share with you for the next 10 minutes or so.
We've got some keen quizzes here, Jimmy. People are straight in.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Look at the fast fingers. Very fast fingers. Too many to call out. There's some very astute Seattle straight off. That's sometimes the one that's a bit trickier. Yeah, so bottom left of my screen, Seattle, Sky Tower. Well, Rainer in the background, I think it is. Fuji from Tokyo, and obviously the most beautiful picture there, which is the multi-story car park by night at Leeds Teaching Hospitals. So yeah, and many of you will know that the connection is an improvement method, and specifically lean as a methodology for improvement. Although what I will go on to say is that the traditional lean approach is something that we still have embedded in our Leeds improvement method, but we've also thought a little bit more broadly about that rather than leave it in its manufacturing state. We tried to adapt it so it does fit our context. And I think that's very relevant to people I speak to on improvement and trying to implement, whether it be continuous quality improvement or quality management systems in general. They have to work in their context. And I think this links back to one of the key things that I hope plays through what I'm going to share, that any methodology you choose around QMS is a socio-technical one. So the method, the tools are important, but they're all executed by humans, and the social interaction and what motivates those humans to do what they do or don't do will be the success or failure of any system you choose. And I'm sure I'm speaking to the converted on that. But I think it is important as we describe what we've done with the invaluable learning we took from our colleagues at Virginia Mason Institute based in Seattle, that they had inherited from their experiences working with folk from Toyota specifically, and how that then works in our context. And I'm sure you'll be working through what's going to work best in yours. So just in conversations already in the introductions, I've heard someone use the phrase what's your true north or your North Star. So we started our journey back in late 2015, 2016 with Virginia Mason supporting us as part of a national plan alongside 4 other trusts supported by NHS, as was improvement. And so we wanted to be clear that everything we did in terms of improvement, transformation had to be patient-centered. That was our true north. And then building beyond that, featuring, as you'd imagine, things around our vision and our strategic priorities, and underpinned by a really key piece of work as an antecedent to our improvement method, which was around our Leeds Way values. This was led by our former chief exec, Julian Hartley, many of you have heard of, who, when he began his work in Leeds a couple of years prior, had said that he really wanted to reset the culture around here. So we had this glue, if you like, this culture of people with this fresh appetite, I would say, for improvement, for thinking about how we could be better, how we could do things different. So the phrase in Japanese is nemawashi. It's like tilling the soil, that it's the ground prep. And I think that one of the key things that worked for us in Leeds is that had been done or was in progress. So then when we brought this method in, we had an appetite from our colleagues in the organisation to think, oh, okay, let's give this a go, because of that prep work that had been done. So very much that cultural groundwork, the prep. So that fits in, doesn't it, in terms of the triangle that is Toyota's triangle, the red one, some of you will recognise, just describing the importance of balancing the technical tools, the improvement science, whichever one you want to choose, being consistent with that and having that, and making sure those tools get to the people who need them. And that's a challenge in any organisation, and I would say particularly one the size of ours at not far off 23,000. It's a lot of people to reach with any kind of skill set. There's the way we lead, so the managerial element. Are we curious? Do we try and adopt a coaching perspective? Are we collaborative? Do we distribute leadership? How are we managing our services and our people? And the philosophy that underpins that, which is that improvement is everybody's responsibility and everybody's business. And we need to support them to be involved in improvement, but also expect them to contribute. And also the bit that's sometimes lost, I think, in the philosophy, in that for Toyota, and we've drawn this through, using our improvement method is a long-term strategy. Yes, we can do some things quite quickly, but we need to be thinking about it in terms of how it's taking us towards multi-year goals, etc., rather than it's a quick fix solution. And at the heart of the graphic, and it still is now that we've redesigned, it's all about the people doing it. So this socio-technical approach, and appreciating that being the key to how we get on well with stuff. So what did VM challenge us to do as an organisation? And I would say this is pretty key, trying to move from and to. And I'll spend a little more time speaking about the elements of what they term the world-class management system, but in particular, thinking about how we get quality assurance, get things in flow on site, in time, just in time, so that we're not building processes that spend a lot of time and energy on assurance retrospectively, thinking about eliminating waiting at any opportunity. So just in terms of the list there, hopefully there's just a few things making you think, what about that? We talk about no new resources, which can be quite contentious. But the premise there is to understand where the waste is in any process and eliminate that waste or reduce it to the best of your ability before adding new resource to it. If we've got a process that is, let's be honest, slightly broken, then it's not very respectful to add more people or stuff to that process, because they're then working a broken process too. And I think historically that's something that we can see. If we add more people, I'll let you decide whether you've seen this at national level. If we add more doctors and nurses, then things will be better. Well, that depends if the doctors and nurses are working in processes that are effective and allow them to do their work well and add value to their patients, or whether we're adding more people to a process that is maybe it could be better. There's opportunity for improvement first. So in that, we try and shift, and this links back to our cultural perspective, from the who to the what, from individuals to process, to find facts and really explore things, that curiosity about, well, why is this not working, and dig into that. And rather than thinking we can't because, to think about how can we, and change that language and that phrasing so that we're thinking about future results. And I think, as I say, that ties back into, if we're focused on significant amounts of process being about assurance, then we don't necessarily have enough time to focus on the improvement. And something that I can't claim as my own learning at all, but I'm grateful of it from one of our quality partners who's a patient's worked with our improvement system for a number of years now, helping us to remember that quality assurance and quality improvement are two sides of the same coin, and they need to be held in balance if we want to move our services forward, as well as meet the requirements from a regulatory or local standard. So really important to have the voice of our customers in our work. Sometimes our customers are our patients directly, sometimes they're our colleagues. I'm very aware that you're currently my customers, and I'm hoping that I'm adding value for your time and day as well. I want to touch briefly on curiosity. This is something that I remember from very early days where I was learning about the method, and I think will endure as long as I'm sharing anything about it with people. The curiosity piece is so important. So the big eyes, big ears, small mouth is a lovely way to think about that. Yes, we do need to ask questions, but we learn an awful lot by being attentive, listening and looking. And the only way we can really do that is if we've committed to go to see. So a lot of the way that we're sharing with our senior leaders and the people they report to and for is, where's your visibility? How can you be present to see what's actually happening? What will you learn? And that can be a little bit of a challenge when you're constantly feeling like you're fighting fires and you've not got time to do it. So one of the things we do really encourage our teams to do, and leaders at any level, is to use that concept, if you like, of go and see, and while you're there, the other graphic as well about being curious, respectfully so. So we talk about wastes, and there's 7 wastes from production originally from the Toyota production system, and I think Virginia Mason still use 7. We've moved that to 8. It helps to create a memorable acronym at the bottom, or mnemonic for it, by including human potential or skills at the heart of that. But essentially this is about helping anybody in the organization to look at their process and like start to think about it with a slightly different lens. What are the opportunities where there's mistakes that are being passed on that become defects? Where have we got too little or too much of stuff? Where are we going backwards and forwards? Where is it that we've just always done it like that and we need to think differently? because we're just really comfortable and we've never really thought about doing it another way. So what's the processing opportunity? And my personal favorite, which is waiting, because anywhere I get the opportunity to sell people, waiting never adds value. And if you get rid of it, very rarely will you get anyone complaining. So if you're unsure what to improve, get rid of waiting is my advice and my soapbox subject. The critical thing in this is that it's not really about what I think, or perhaps about what you think about your process or your people. It's the perspective of your customers in your process. And this is something that lands really well for our colleagues when we're sharing this as part of our improvement method, the perspective of your customer. And if you're in a back office role, your customer might be frontline teams. It might be that you're in a frontline role and your customer is directly the patient. It does come back to our strategic triangle. It's all about the patient in the end. But sometimes the people we're working with are colleagues in the organization. So how are we making sure that we're adding value from their perspective to the work we share? And that can be really helpful thinking about, in large organizations, our siloed approach sometimes to working and trying to break down some of those barriers around silos and saying, how can I help you do the work that you need to do best? And often that'll add a bit of joy as well. I've got a scientific background. Don't hold it against me. I'm a therapist by background, so I do like a little bit of quantitative evaluation. So equations are friendly to me. This one is about quality, and it is Virginia Mason's, which we've shamelessly acknowledged and kept. Think it works. I'm going to go fastest fingers again because I like a quiz already. So I've got quality, which is the giveaway. You can't have anything points for Q. But you can have points for A, O, S, or W. Let's see how fast the fingers are now, Kate. People still on it with that.
We've got a bid for outcome.
Correct. Very well done. I'm impressed. Not structure. I'm just trying to keep track of them coming through. W is waste. Well done, yeah. Appropriate, yes. That's sometimes a stumbling block for people. So A is appropriateness. Q is quality, A is appropriateness, we've got W is waste, we've got O is outcome, S. So it could be safety, it's not. Thanks for the suggestion, Chris. It could also be sustainability, Joe, but it isn't. Standards, success, all good suggestions. Not quite right yet. Standard work, yeah, that's features. Structure, skills. Someone's going to get it in a minute. Yes, June, first one I've seen. I'm sure others have got it. I'm going to call June out of service. So the first thing is we need to do what's appropriate for our customer, whoever that is. And then we need to think about, are we delivering the best possible quality outcome? And what's the service element that we're offering there? What's the experience? Because we all know you could get a great outcome, but you could have a really poor experience to achieve that outcome for whatever reason. And we would want that to be different. And for teams particularly that are performing well, that all makes lots of sense. And then we say, but your outcome and your service might be great, but it's undermined by the waste in your process. And I hope that it comes back to my point about waiting, because you might have fantastic outcomes and you might have patients saying, when I got in the system, they were so good. I was really well looked after, but I had to wait a long time. So waste undermines the quality of the service we provide because it detracts from the outcome and the service experience for our I suppose, service users, yeah. But ultimately, if it's not appropriate, then we can't really argue there's a lot of quality in it, or it's pretty tricky. So we like that as one of the things we share within our method. Just thought I'd throw in a graphic to bring it to life. Here's something we did last week. So we were looking at the patient safety incident reporting framework and how that can apply to our process for healthcare associated infection investigations. It's quite hard to say that without using the acronyms, but I think I've got there. So the picture that is a bit bigger with more post-it notes on is the previous process, and the one that we moved it to last week to try out live this week is the one in the bottom. And this is using the method, I think, at its best. We put the right people and we invested in their time for 4.5 days to say, right, can you make this process better? And they came up with something that is, I think fundamentally better. It ties the patient right in. It meets the requirements from a regulatory point of view. It really does bring that PSERF perspective to the work. So this is how the method can help people to really change their process on the front line. And we've tried this on a small scale in one of our clinical service units. There's 6 wards in the pilot, but we're really optimistic that this is something that can scale across our organisation. So just a little example that hopefully is useful to see how that we apply our method in the organisation. So a couple of things about how that works, just to wrap up, or a few slides. As our quality management system, again, reference Virginia Mason. If things work, then why change them? World-class management. So what's the strategy? What's the cross-functional? How do we break the silos down? Because customers, our patients, experience healthcare horizontally through our organisation, perhaps from the front door at the emergency department all the way through to discharge. But we organise ourselves more vertically, don't we? By, well, you'll come in and that's the urgent care directorate, and then you'll need radiology, and then you might need this other, internal medicine, and then you'll need some therapies important. How do we connect that stuff across? That's cross-functional. And then the daily management is, how do we make sure that we're meeting demand, have the right capacity to do so, are attentive to the things that are on track, and particularly what's off track, and helping people to do the right things, some of the tools within the method. What we've done over the last year is try to strengthen that strategic element to that by introducing what we've called 7 annual commitments. So we have our multi-year goals, we have a long-term vision, but what are the things we're going to try and galvanize our teams around this year to move the dial on the things that matter most for the organization? So for example, there is one particularly around staff retention. So that was the focus. How do we keep the people we've got? And also one in contrast, let's say, around reducing length of stay. So a 0.5 day length of stay reduction on some of our key episodes of care. So different things into that mix. So that's the strategic part, and trying to tie it in together. And that's led, each of those 7 is led or co-led by our executives using an A3 thinking approach and metrics that underpin it. So cross-functional, and I touched on this a little bit. So how do we get across some of our traditional barriers to make sure that we've got integrated approaches to improving our care pathways? I would say probably the work last week is a good example of that. In terms of infection prevention is everyone's responsibility, and there is specialist support needed at times to make sure we do our best with that, or understand where things have not worked well.
Last couple of minutes, Jimmy, before we move to questions.
Thank you, which is good because I've got 2 slides to go. Daily management. So how do we use concepts like team huddles, production boards, make the work we need to do today or this week visible, track that across teams, escalate appropriately, but empower as best as we can for things to be done nearest to the front line, whatever that front line looks like. Ties back in with that go and see concept that I shared with you earlier. And the last slide is shamelessly one that I've wanted to throw in from work around by Warwick Business School, namely Nicola Burgess, who's now a professor up the road in York, around the general learning from continuous improvement approaches and the antecedents to that, some of the key elements for it. So I'm sure many colleagues will be really familiar with this work, but if you haven't come across it, I really encourage you to do that, because a lot of what we've found works for us is really into those 6 steps. As you can see, kind of reference all of that step 1 about, have you got the right appetite in the organization? How might you do that? And hopefully, again, tying back into what many of you will be aware of, the elements, the DNA, if you like, the building blocks that are encouraged in the new NHS Impact framework. Hopefully you're seeing some of those permeate in our Leeds improvement method. I'm going to close with saying it's in some places in our organisation, you could come and see this is alive and kicking well, and it would be as I've described it. And in other places, less so. And I'm comfortable with that because it is a continuous improvement approach, and not everyone has appetite or capacity at the same time. But I think we do have something that is appreciated by those who've accessed it, and we're still on that journey to trying to make sure that that is consistent and standard across the organisation. So yeah, I could take questions, but I need to press the stop share screen at this point.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you very much. And there's lots of questions coming through the chat. We probably won't get through all of these, but any questions that we're not able to answer now, we will gather some responses from Jimmy, if that's okay with you, Jimmy, to share in the pack afterwards.
Sure. Let's do that.
But yeah, there's a question from Chris. How important is the LMI branding and how is it used in practice? Oh,
interesting one. So we did, Catherine will touch on this, we did rebrand a little bit a couple of years ago when we were launching some new content and just, I guess, moving from copying Virginia Mason's approach, which we were doing in the early days. They talk about shuhari. Basically, you move from copying to developing something of your own. So I think that identity is important, and particularly in the landscape now, helping people to connect that is there. But we did it fairly late, I would say, the branding piece.
Nice. Thanks, Jimmy. And then Sarah has asked, the patient view is obviously very important, but is it really self-evident to colleagues? And how do you make it easier to hear uncomfortable things from patients when processes need improvement?
Well, that's a great question. So from the outset, we have really tried to make sure that we have the patient voice directly in our improvement events. So be they 5-day, 3-day workshops. If it's about understanding the perspective of the patient, we'll really encourage people just to go out. Sadly, we have many patients in our organisation all the time, so it's not hard to find them and ask them questions. So I think we have really encouraged people. And then there's a little bit about the safety that you need to build for staff to have patients, side by side with them in the work. And that's taken a little bit of time. But I think really encouragingly, once people allow themselves to be open to that, they see that it's really supportive challenge that they get, not conflict creating.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jimmy. And then the last question we'll answer now, but like I say, we'll come to the other questions in the pack that we sent out after the visit. Jacqueline's asked, why 7 commitments? And do you link these with your annual quality account?
Oh, why 7? I'd say is my lucky number. Well, we had 53 when the executives went into the room to develop these, and we came out with 7. And I think that was a win. I might have preferred to have fewer, but I think it was where they could just get to, that's rationalized enough that we can hold on to 7, and moves us from the kind of 53 that existed before. So I don't think there's a scientific answer to 7. If anyone was trying to do this, I'd encourage them maybe to go with a couple fewer, but it was good progress for us. And yes, they do link with our quality account, although we're just finishing year 1 of having these, so it's quite formative, should we say, about how that happens.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you all for all those questions, and yeah, thank you, Jimmy, for sharing that and for kicking us off. We're gonna move on to a hearing from Chris Backus from the Virginia Mason Institute. So when we had the visit in November, we had a live link up with him, and he shared some thoughts on what we've done as we've edited his talk down into a shorter kind of 12-minute video that we're going to play now. Jimmy, do you just want to say very briefly how you've worked with Chris, or kind of his relationship to what you've just shared?
Yeah, of course, Kate. Thank you. So Chris Backus is what we call our executive partner. So we've always had support from Virginia Mason Institute at an executive level, at a senior leadership level, since we started the partnership. And when the formal NHSI partnership ended, Leeds struck a new one with VMI, and Chris has been our support from that. So he speaks with me regularly, as well as our executives, to help share his insight on what we might do to continue to develop our method.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jimmy. So I'm going to share my screen to share the video. So it's about 12 minutes. And then after that, we're going to move into some breakout rooms so you can begin to kind of debrief and share with each other what you've heard from Jimmy, what you've heard from Chris, and how that might relate to the context that you're working in. So I will share my screen now. I would love just to get a thumbs up that you can see and hear. Okay. Can you all see that? Just someone give me a thumbs up. Great. Thank you, Nikki.
Our problems are shared problems. Healthcare has a set of problems that no one seems to be able to solve. But what we're seeing is there are solutions deeply embedded in all of the people who come in to work every single day. And it's just finding that way to appropriately ask them and inspire them and engage them in a way forward. It actually, your problem is my problem. It's just how we experience it and what we're trying to do. It's different because of the situation we're in, but our problem is still the same. You can't make an assumption. You have to go see. You have to ask why. Why is this a problem? And you don't do it with judgment. You do it with, why is this so hard? What's in your way? What are the pebbles in your shoe that make every day just not as comfortable as it could be? Because that type of conversation allows us to hear from people who do the work every day. And what's really cool is when we enlighten them with an approach and a system and methods to use the tools with them, they start to see that there is a better way. And we can do better by ourselves and for our patients. And all of a sudden, you start to see this shift of people who have surrendered to the problems around them, to feeling really empowered that there's something I can do today to make work a little bit better. And if I could do that for myself, think about the impact it has on the patient experience. Think of the impact it might have on my colleagues. As a system, we have to learn from what we do. So that's why a single management system is so important, because then if we're all using the same tools and methods in very different ways, because the work we do is very different. Sometimes you're right up close with patients, care at the bed, or you're part of a finance team trying to work out a better process so things can get through the process the first time complete and accurate. But it's when you have the same system, then people who do very different work can share common concepts to what sounds like, if you strip away the detail of a situation, it actually, your problem is my problem. It's just how we experience it and what we're trying to do. If you're trying to get whole system change, you can't just, flip on a light switch and go. I mean, you need to learn, people need to have the right skills and ability to do full system change. But if you want to get started, it's as simple as identifying a problem, exploring a few ideas and taking action on those ideas, just doing a very quick plan, do, study, act cycle with your team. So here's a quick suggestion. What if you just put a simple board called stones in your shoe, pebbles in your shoe, whatever, and those are the things that annoy people. And then the second column is who's going to work on this problem. Is it in process, and did we get to a solution? So you have these simple columns of problem, idea, completed or in process. You put that up, people on your team you'll start to see this organic reframing of complaints to problems, and you'll get more of them just naturally because of that final column on that board, which could be just a simple piece of flip chart paper on the wall and post-it notes. That says completed. Because the one thing that most people distrust about launching a new improvement system is they hear a lot about it, they just never see it finished. And so if you really want to inspire people, keep your promise, say what you're going to do, complete the trust cycle, say you're going to do something, and then show that it was done. So it's just figuring out, what is your organization willing to commit to? And then, and if all you can do at this point is just have conversations with patients while they're with you, then that's a great start, because that's now going to give you better access to an understanding of the walking in the shoes of the patients. So how do you get boards involved? Helping them understand what their role is. You know, we all can perform better if we know what our role and expectations of our role are. Make sure the board is aware of what it means, not only for the organization, but for themselves. And I also have learned that being able to kind of challenge the status quo is not something that has been emphasized at all times for board members, but it's a powerful opportunity for them. So if we can get them to believe in the value of the system by seeing it and doing it, feeling it for themselves, then they can be probably our greatest ally for change within the system. People who do the work do the improvement, and we have to enable that. What I've experienced in healthcare is there are many people who are in leadership in healthcare, especially clinical roles, who don't really have a lot of clarity about expectations on their leadership role. And so, you know, there's something about that of can we help our leaders grow? But it all starts with clarity. You know, what's expected and what's required and what do we need from you? And sometimes people, if we're not that clear with them, they have to guess, you know, and their best intention may have just derailed the effort and they didn't even know it because we haven't shared that with them. The first thing is, if you don't do anything because you're afraid of trying and failing, that is probably the worst way to go at it. It's like, don't worry about perfect, get something going and learn from it. Of course, we're not going to do tests of change live with patients where there's harm, but we can simulate a lot of things. So don't get so paralyzed by perfection that you don't get something started. Get it going and accept the fact that you're going to learn from it. So part of any good process is just a pause and reflect built in. So, you know, you want to engage people through the improvement events, activities, workshops, whatever, but you have to always remember the intention and purpose of this moment in time is to actually get a sustainable change. And what we find is if we can prepare people better on the why, we have less of a problem with implementation and sustainability. The rule in farming is you never plant until the soil is ready. What's the point? You just waste the seeds. So if we're trying to plant improvement, we have to understand what makes a team most ready to sustain a change, and then we work backwards. So if that's what's needed, then what is needed to get a team engaged in improvement? Then what is needed to get started so that we can do improvement so that we can sustain change? And I think we only think about, we get to the moment of how do we engage people for change, and then we're kind of mystified that we're not getting sustainability, but we haven't thought about it. So we always have to start with what's the change we need? How do we sustain? What are some of the factors necessary for sustaining change? And then that pays forward into how well we engage people in the improvement. And by knowing what it means and what we need to do to engage people in the improvement, including how we connect with boards and leaders and those things, then that actually helps us get started in the right way. The frontline leaders need some ability to, they need to know about the method enough to use it every day to get it in place. They need some structure. So that's where daily management came in. And then we also realized that some of the people we had in leadership roles were really good technically, but we hadn't invested in them to be good adaptive leaders. These are the 5 specifications that we use to demonstrate value: quality, which implies quality safety, service, delivery, morale, and then cost. It's a balanced scorecard because some improvement you do just for the sake of engagement. So that's on morale. But when you think about telling the story of improvement, should try and tell the story in those 5 channels. And the reason we put cost last is because we don't want to emphasize cost cutting. We want to emphasize removing burden of work, eliminating waste. Because if we can focus on doing things right the first time, quality, in the right way, as we should, quality, safety, if we can deliver to meet demand, do it with a level of service where people actually feel valued in doing the work and they get value from the work. That's a service to both our teams and to our patients. We should see a cost variable. So right now you're all under financial pressures. And so how can we start messaging improvement in a way that saves time? So let's say you do a quick test of change with the team and you save 5 minutes on a task, but you improve quality, you get it done right the first time. So you meet expectations of governance, you get better efficiency because it takes less time because you're only doing it once and it's only 5 minutes, but you improve quality, people are engaged, you know they're going to follow through on it. But then you go back and say, okay, so how many times per day, per team does this happen? And so suddenly 5 minutes done by 20 people, that's 100 minutes times, 100 times a day. That's 1,000 minutes that you're giving back to the organization. You're giving that time back for care. So how can you argue with that, right? Because right now in our current situation, sometimes the work they have to do is waste because of the way it's done, or it has to be redone 4 or 5 times to get it right. So that we're paying for that. So could we make better use of that time and money by caring for the next patient? So we can free up capacity. I think it's how we find a way to frame improvement, because any improvement is good improvement. And I find that those 5 specifications is a great way of framing.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Chris. And the eagle-eyed among you will have noticed that when we did the live link with him for that video, because of the time difference, his talk started in like the dead of night. And then by the time he'd finished talking, we could see the daylight and the garden around him, which some of you might have clocked, which tickled me a little bit. So in a moment, we're going to have some time in breakout rooms for you to kind of discuss and debrief with each other. What have you heard from what Jimmy and Chris have shared that you're already doing? What did you hear about that you could try? And then what questions did it raise for you? And so Vicky's helpfully just popped those in the chat. Thank you, Vicky. So we'll give you a minute or so just to think for yourselves on your own now before we open up those breakout rooms. So a chance to think and reflect for yourselves. What did you notice that you're already doing? What did you hear that you could try? And what questions did it raise? And Vicky will be making some breakout rooms in the background. And just to reiterate, in case you joined later and missed this at the start of the call, if for any reason you don't feel able to join the breakout rooms this morning, or you'd prefer to carry on thinking on your own rather than talk, absolutely feel free to stay in the main room. You're more than welcome to do that. So Vicky, feel free to get those breakout rooms ready and let us know when they're good to go.
They are good to go. So I will open them now. And Kate, remind us how long?
Yeah, good question. I think we've got till 1/4 and we'll bring you back at just before 1/4, and then we're going to go into a 10-minute break. See you shortly.
I'm opening.
Welcome back if you're just rejoining. I'll just give the others a minute. Welcome back, welcome back. always feel a bit mean pulling people out of breakout room conversations because you know that you're cutting someone off mid-sentence. But there we are. All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope there was some fruitful discussions and a chance to kind of discuss and debrief what was coming out of your reflections from listening to Jimmy and listening to Chris as well. We're going to go to a break just in a couple of minutes' time, but before we do that, would love just to hear from you in the chat. What are you taking away from what you've heard so far? So what's something that's sticking with you from either, you know, what you've heard Jimmy share, what you've heard Chris share, or maybe something that's come out of those discussions and conversations in breakout rooms? So just a chance to share in the chat. What's something that's, you know, really sticking with you from what you've heard so far? That's great to hear, Sarah. Thank you. Lots of lovely reflections. Yeah. These are lovely reflections. Lots of appreciation for the readiness of the soil. Yeah, which feels like a really kind of fruitful idea. And lots of recognition of the resources, the time, what's needed to actually make this kind of thing happen and work. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Keep those reflections coming. Brilliant. So it's 11:15. We're going to take a 10-minute break and come back at 11:25 when we're going to hand over to Catherine. Catherine, do you want to give us a little wave? So we're going to be hearing from Catherine, who leads on kind of education and training at Leeds. And so she's going to be talking a little bit about what that process looks like for them. So we'll take 10 minutes, get yourself a cup of tea, step away from your screen, and then just listen out for my voice when I'm saying we're coming back together. Enjoy your break. Hope you had a lovely chance to step away from your computer, however tempting it might have been to get some emails done. And I'm going to hand over to Catherine. Catherine, welcome. I'll let you introduce yourself and your role. And Catherine's going to talk a little bit about the education and training work at Leeds around the Leeds Improvement Method. And then again, as before, we'll have some time in breakout rooms to kind of discuss and debrief what we're taking away from what Catherine's shared. Vicky, I can't remember what we decided. Are you sharing Catherine's slides or shall I?
I can. Do you want to share them?
Yeah, I can do. Let me do that now. So Catherine, you just tell me when you would like me to flick through. Loading, lovely slow load to really build some suspense. There we go.
Perfect. Hi everyone. So as Kate said, my name's Catherine. I'm an improvement specialist in the KPO team here at LTHT, and I'm here to speak today about the evolution of our education and training offer. Next slide, please. So first of all, I'm just going to cover our previous education and training offer and the kind of why we decided to change. So as Jimmy kind of explored in his presentation, we had a 5-year partnership with VMI from 2016. The training materials that we used were what had been shared with us as part of the contract. Few changes over the kind of the 5 years of the contract, really. The training offer prior to our changes that we've made over the last couple of years looked a bit like this. So obviously our induction, which is 20 minutes for all staff who start in the organisation. Understanding value and waste, which is kind of a 2-hour introduction to the Leeds Improvement Method. And then we kind of jump to Lean for Leaders, which was our kind of flagship offering. It was aimed at kind of senior leaders in the organisation first. It was thought that it's good to kind of have those people role model behaviours and promote the course to others, but this maybe also created a bit of perception that the Leeds Improvement Method was only for kind of very senior staff. And as you can see, there is also a bit of a jump between the kind of 2 hours of value and waste and then 6 days over the course of several months for lean for leaders. And then also we had our advanced lean training, which was the most advanced offer, targeted at a very small number of people in the organisation. So Lean for Leaders was paused in March 2021. Oh, sorry, not next slide yet. And the kind of catalyst for this was really obviously COVID pandemic. We've been delivering a lot of our training online during this period. And, you know, it was tricky to transition some of the materials to that medium. And also, obviously, our Virginia Mason contract, the initial contract came to an end in 2021, which gave us an opportunity and impetus to make larger scale changes, I think, to the materials rather than the kind of maybe the small PDSAs that have been undertaken before. It's not to say the Virginia Mason materials weren't really good. Obviously substantial. Other partnership trusts continue to use them with success. It was more that our Leeds context suggested that maybe more substantial changes were needed. Next slide, please. So essentially, as Jimmy was talking about the customer voice being, you know, crucial in terms of where the value is in processes, our customer voice told us that the Leeds context required those more substantial changes than maybe other trusts had made to the original Virginia Mason materials. So on the screen, you can see our feedback themes that were collated over the course of the delivery of Lean for Leaders. And we really wanted to act on the feedback of our customers. So the journey to creating that new training course began. Some key elements to highlight that people fed back were around the huge investment in time that Lean for Leaders was. People didn't really complete it, a very high attrition rate of around 70%. You know, the training materials were very detailed and prescriptive, hundreds of slides, lots of content for people to take on. And obviously a high amount of work that was expected for the people that came on the course to complete in order to kind of complete the course. There was also a lot of feedback around the use of, you know, non-Leeds examples. People always asking for Leeds examples and how do we practically apply this to our work. I think that we needed to introduce more sort of LTHT context and examples to what we were delivering. So there were kind of our key themes that were the catalyst for the changes that we needed to make. Next slide, please. So we wanted to kind of really take the opportunity during the pause to have a really good evidence base around what our new education and training offer should look like. So obviously we undertook research, you know, feedback, analysed data from various sources, staff and customer feedback, survey data, focus groups. But also I want to highlight that obviously we're a team of continuous improvement specialists. We're not necessarily education specialists, so specialists in delivering training. So I think there was a recognition that we needed to consider not only the content of the course, but the kind of how around how people learn and how adults learn specifically. So we really wanted to ensure that our course review was linked to this relevant learning theory. We focused a lot on andragogy, which is the theories of adult learning, so opposed to pedagogy. So it's the theories around adult learning and the conditions that support that we really wanted to plug into when we were creating our new training course. So Knowles is a proponent of the theory of andragogy. I've just put the little kind of key principles of his theory on the screen for you. He says that in order for kind of training to be effective for adult learners, the work needs to be linked to a real life problem, which also kind of links back to what our customers were telling us. The kind of opportunity for people to link their learning to their kind of personal work-related experience. The idea that learners are supported through a community and they arrive with experience that they can kind of learn from each other, not just kind of us stood at the front and kind of delivering the training, that they can kind of learn from each other in small groups. So the key principles on which we decided to shape our training were based on this research, essentially. A couple of other bits that I want to highlight are that we wanted to be kind of facilitators, not teachers. So using that variety of different kind of, you know, methods of delivery to keep our learners engaged. So we didn't want it to be a kind of lecture, but a more of participative, I can't say the word, participative discussion, essentially. So not just us standing at the front and delivering it, but that kind of group discussion. So the key element of self-determined learning that you can see on Noel's a little chart there is essential. So we don't want to spoon feed delegates. We want to ensure that they're able to kind of pull on elements that they need that are relevant to their kind of context. That was another key thing that we wanted to introduce. Next slide, please. So Jimmy also alluded to this, our kind of new branding that we also went alongside the delivery of the course. So we took the opportunity when we had it to create that kind of distinctive LTHT branding, which you can see. We felt that this was important to kind of create that distinctive new identity around the new course and make a kind of clear difference with what went before. So obviously our research informed this new education training and offering, and because I mentioned before about the gap between, you know, individuals that completed 2-hour value and waste session and the people that did the kind of 6 months to a year of Lean for Leaders, we decided as a team to create a kind of foundational course in the first instance. So it was hoped that this would cover kind of key concepts that people needed, as we've got on the screen there. We've got 5S, our wastes, PDSA cycles. And that would be able to be more accessible to a wider audience, being just kind of a day commitment and open to everyone in the organisation. Next slide, please. So our new course was launched in autumn 2021. So it's been in place now for over 2 years now, isn't it? Yes. Really positive feedback from our delegates, as you can see on the screen. Managed to cover more people than we were able to cover with Lean for Leaders in terms of giving a wider range of people that kind of core knowledge of the Leeds improvement method. So for context, there's about 150 graduates still in the organisation of Lean for Leaders. So that gives you a sense of the proportion of people we're able to reach with this new course. And just some of the really positive language on the screen that kind of speaks to some of the bits that our customers asked for in the first instance that you can see there. Next slide, please. So obviously, the intention then was to develop intermediate offering based on our learnings from that foundational course that we introduced, and essentially to replace our kind of flagship Lean for Leaders course, which had been the kind of the key thing that we were delivering before. So our intent was, again, to adhere to those principles on the screen, to reduce that burden of work for individuals coming on the course, supporting them to complete it and deliver like really practical improvement. You know, the intent is to create that continuous improvement throughout the organisation, and we really wanted that to be an element of the intermediate course. And obviously adhering to Knowles's principles of andragogy and making that training relevant to the Leeds context. So these were our kind of key principles on which we developed foundation and which we then went on to develop intermediate. Next slide, please. Just briefly touching on our approach. So just to say that we used our own method to improve our work. We wanted to hear from the voice of the customer, so we had focus groups. We used, as you can see on the screen, a bit of process flow charting to develop our course over the summer of 2022. Next slide, please. So our new intermediate course launched in August 2022, initially as a pilot, but we had our kind of first official cohort in November 2022. So we're now on cohort 15, I think, which is the one that started this month in February. So the course now encompasses, as opposed to Lean for Leaders, which was 6 days, 3 days of teaching over 3 consecutive months. So that reduces the time burden on participants, but it's still incorporating those key Leeds improvement method concepts that we, didn't really change from what Virginia Mason had given us, the content, but it was more about how it was delivered, adhering to those key principles, which I put on the screen before. So just some figures on the screen, similar to Foundation in terms of the people that would recommend our course to a colleague. We get really positive feedback for both courses. And we've managed to cover around 160 people to date since the winter of 2022. Next slide, please. Just some positive feedback on the screen now from our Leeds Improvement Method intermediate colleagues, delegates, people that have been on the course. Just again, speaking to the things that we wanted to change, you know, people have said, great that we've got more examples and that it can be linked to kind of practically what they're doing in their day-to-day job. Next slide, please. So around the course, I just wanted to touch on that we offer support, not just the course itself, but resources. So this is our Padlet. We like to say it's kind of pull rather than push. It's respecting those adult learners, essentially, who might want to get a bit more, depending on what their project is focused on. So as I've kind of talked about, intermediate has core and optional modules. So we cover the majority of people that come on the course, obviously, with the core content, and we offer extra content to those who may want or need it, but it's their choice. If they want to access it, they can. We offer it, but it's not mandatory. And I also wanted to touch on as well our coaching structure, which is offered to all delegates. So we have coaching available for everyone that comes on the course to really help them develop and deliver that practical improvement. Next slide, please. This is our current state as of now. Obviously, we've still got our induction, but now we have our kind of foundation, intermediate offerings and our optional content. We are constantly evolving it. We've just done a bit of a review actually last week in terms of the things that we're delivering, the content, the style, based on the kind of feedback from our customers. So we are constantly, you know, using our PDSA cycles, continuous improvement heads to continuously evolve what the training course looks like. That's what it looks like now. Our future plans, I think, are looking a little bit more about what that advanced option looks like. Obviously, we've got those optional bits that people can pull on, but our customers are also asking for a bit more of an advanced option. So I think that's our next steps beyond what we've got now. So thank you very much. That's everything from me. I'm not sure if we're taking questions. Are we putting people in breakout rooms? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, we're gonna give people a chance to kind of debrief that in breakout rooms. There's a couple of questions that have come up in the chat as we've been talking, Catherine, but Jimmy, I think, has helpfully been scribbling some answers to them. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we wanted to give you a chance to think about, in your contexts, you know, what does education and training look like for the kind of the QI approaches you're embedding. So thinking about, yeah, what it looks like in your context, what works well, what challenges you face, and I guess a chance to share with each other any ideas that have been sparked from what you've heard Catherine talk about. So we'll move you into breakout rooms probably for around 10 minutes, and then we'll bring everyone back together before the final speaker. So thank you, Catherine, and feel free to join a breakout room as well. I'm sure people would love to pick your brains further as well. So Vicky, over to you to open up those breakout rooms when they're ready.
Okay, they're ready now. If I spot anyone, whether you're in a pair, I might move you into another breakout room, so don't be alarmed if you get invited somewhere else after a minute. I will open the rooms now.
Thank you, Vicky. Enjoy. Just waiting for the final few to come back from breakout rooms. They're using up the last few seconds, which I love. Brilliant. Welcome back, everyone. I hope there were some fruitful discussions. And as before, would love to just invite you just to share in the chat one thing you're taking away from those conversations. So something that's sticking with you from what you've been thinking about in terms of education and training, or it might be a question that you're holding that you'd love us to take away and ask Catherine to write an answer for. One thing is hard. Yeah, nice. Well, it could just be a reflection. It doesn't have to be the most important one, just something that's sticking with you from that section of the visit. So I'll just give you a second to add that into the chat. What are you taking away from that breakout room conversation? Thanks, Louis. Thanks, Julia. So it sounds like some thinking about attendance, about how to make things your own, about how it can be inclusive and accessible. Interesting. Lots of lovely reflections there. Thank you. Please keep them coming. And yeah, if you've got questions you'd love Catherine to answer, please do add them into the chat. And I'm sure, as we've been doing before, either we can come back to them in the chat live now, or we can try and get an answer to them and share that with you in the pack that we send out afterwards. So we are moving towards the final part of our visit, and really happy to welcome Tara. So hi, Tara, welcome. And I'll let you introduce yourself in a moment. And I think we're going to have a second person, Manu, joining as well, who I don't think has joined yet, but should be joining fairly soon. And I'll let Tara introduce herself in a moment, but I guess to share why we've included this part of the visit. In November, one of the things we did was we gave everyone sort of an hour or so to go off on Gemba walks around the hospital to see some of the improvement work in action. And obviously, it's much more difficult to do that online, but we did want to give you a chance to hear a little bit about what does some of this look like in practice? What are the sorts of things that are happening? And so Tara and Manu are going to be sharing a little bit about that. Tara, I will share your slides. And so whenever you're ready and you want me to flick on to the next one, you can just let me know. I'm just loading that up now. While I do that, do you want to introduce yourself and just, say who you are and a little bit about your role?
Hi everyone, my name's Tara Bain. I'm a service manager at Leeds Teaching Hospitals Trust within urgent care. So this is a non-clinical management role, and the areas I sort of specialise covering is A&E adults at our LGI site, paediatrics, minor illness, and the op centre within urgent care. So just for background, so LTHT has two A&E departments across two sites. At LGI, we are the busiest site, so we are based in the city centre, and we have a high number of walk-in patients. It's also the regional trauma centre for West Yorkshire, so it's a very busy site. So I'm just here today to tell you about one of the improvements that we have, or are still currently trying to embed, and just tell you about the process for that. So this is around patient flow in the emergency department. Next slide, please. So, thanks. Okay, so again, just a bit of background. So the emergency department is split up into areas. So we have what is called, obviously, apart from our minor injuries and minor illness, we have our major blue team, which where the majority of our ambulance attendances arrive, and our sicker patients. And then we have an area what's called RAU, and that is our rapid assessment unit. Now, I'll start by saying that don't let that name fool you. The RAU is in no way rapid, so the average turnaround for a patient was around 4.5 hours, when the national emergency care standard is 4 hours. So the majority of the patients that come through here are our walk-in patients. Around 90% of the patients that go through this area are walk-in patients, and on average, I think when we get in the numbers, it was around 150 to 200 patients a day. It is by far our busiest area in the department, and as a result, our overall performance relating to that 4-hour standard was quite low. So the main things that we look at there is the overall target of 4 hours. That's then broken down into admitted and non-admitted. So how many patients are seen, treated and discharged home within 4 hours. I think previously we were about 50%, 55% with that team, with our target being 85%. Time to see a clinician. So our metric is that, you know, we should be seeing patients within an hour, and that just wasn't happening. So that's a really poor experience for our patients who I'll go into that process in a moment, and I'll give you some of the patient feedback and the staff feedback. But overall, it was definitely an area which we knew we needed to do something with, and we weren't really sure of where to go. So we enlisted the help of our lovely KPO team, and started to discuss some ideas about how we could take this work forward. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the process before, but it's just here in a little bit more detail. But essentially, a walk-in patient would arrive at the emergency department. They'd then be streamed into the ROU team. The patient would then get their observations undertaken by a CSW before taking a seat back in the waiting room. They then got up and saw a nurse who did a nurse assessment. So basically asked them the history, the questions relating to their presentation. Once that had happened, the patient would then go back to the waiting room and wait to see a doctor. They would then be pulled through to see a doctor, have a further assessment with a doctor, be asked those exact same questions again by a doctor. So essentially the patient may have told the same story 2 or 3 times by this point. They'd then go for any investigations or undertake treatment before either being discharged home or a decision to admit. So if you look at the flow for that, the waiting times in between are quite long. So if we look, it's an average time for an hour from the time you have your obs to the time you see a nurse, and then a further hour before you see a doctor, and then another hour and 22 minutes before you have your treatment and the decision is made on the outcome of your attendance. So some of the problems at the top, we especially highlighted. So we had things like, I can't read that from here, but patients just waiting for a long period of time, as I mentioned, repeating the story over, that we just couldn't keep up with the demand. So as soon as people were being seen, more people were coming in. So it was just a circle of delays within that team. Next slide, please. So this is just some comments that we took from patients before we made any improvement. So, you know, of course we had positive comments, of course, but you know, there were improvements to be made. So one patient was told it was around a 2 or 3 hour wait, but then they were sat there all day. So when you come into our emergency department, for example, what you will see is the time it is currently to see a doctor. That doesn't then take into account the time then you have to wait for further treatments, investigations, and for further clinical input. So patients' expectations weren't met. Patients felt ignored. So they felt as though they were just getting up, sitting down. They didn't really know what was happening. They didn't really know what was going to happen. And that was something we really wanted to look at. And then finally, again, just another one. So just being long waiting times, staff look stressed, and it's not really a friendly environment. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we also got staff feedback. So some of the staff feedback included, said that there weren't enough space to see patients. The computer systems are too slow. There's no clinical.
Sorry, Tara, I'm going to reshare. Sorry, you carry on.
Yeah.
my computer just freaked out.
And just overall sense that the system wasn't really working, but we had it was kind of just what we did, and we just accepted the fact that this was our process. So after we worked with our KPO team and we did some timings on things, they came to us with that process, and we decided that we would undertake a rapid improvement week So a rapid improvement week is a week where it's a dedicated week time out. We had representatives from members of ED teams, so myself, Manu, who I think still coming to join, who was our lead clinician, and one of our Band 7 nurses. We were the process owners. We also had representatives from members of the team, and that includes our medical colleagues, our nursing colleagues, and our CSW colleagues. And that whole process, we had a process sponsor. So in that case, this was our clinical director and our general manager. At the beginning of the week, they set us a challenge, and our task that week was come up with some ideas and somehow improvements, well, how we could meet that challenge. So the challenge that they set us was that we needed to reduce the average turnaround time for patients to 2 hours. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So what you can see here is one of the tools that we use as part of the Leeds Improvement Method. And this is a target progress report. So the baseline is the average numbers from when the KPO team came and did some timing. So I did mention it before, but the overall lead time for patients in this area was 4 hours, 18 minutes and 50 seconds. And the target to get that down to was 2 hours. So essentially, we need to cut down the time of patient's journey time within this team by half. So quite a big challenge to do, but I think we were all very up for the challenge. The standard work in progress, so the baseline was 23, to take that down to 6. Wanted to reduce our quality and delivery defects down to 0, so no defects in the process. So this isn't just about cutting down time, it's about cutting down on defects also, and to improve staff, but obviously most importantly our patient satisfaction as well. So, you know, quite a big challenge there, but I think it was a really good team. So the people on that rapid improvement week, it was voluntary, so everyone on that week wanted to be there and really wanted to make some changes. I think that quite a lot of the team had also undertaken their introduction to improvement course with KPO, as we encourage all our staff to do. So at the beginning of the week, we came in with really good attitude, really wanting to try new things to change. So next slide, please. So over the course of the week, after going through some of the basic improvement methods for people that haven't done anything about that before, we started looking through different ideas. So what we did do in the first couple of days is every member of the team was encouraged to write ideas form, no matter what role they did. So everyone, I think we had about 30 or 40 ideas, and what we sort of started to see from that there were similar themes coming out. So what you're seeing now is just an example of one of the ideas, and everyone went through them. You know, there were things that we weren't able to change or improve on in that week, so we put them in what we call a car park to pick up afterwards. And one of the things that we were seeing as a theme from all our ideas was that the patient journey would be improved if they were seen early in the journey by a clinician. So we all got together and kind of agreed a process that might work. So the process that we agreed on, which I'll go through in further detail later, but was that instead of a patient seeing a nurse and then waiting to see a doctor, the nurse and the doctor would see the patient together at that further assessment stage. So what this in theory would mean is that patients would be seen more quickly. We'd have a joint assessment by a nurse and a doctor. We would get a clear treatment plan or diagnostic plan earlier in the journey. And we'd also be able to make sure patients are in the right place. So, for example, could patients go directly to an assessment area? Could they be seen in our minor illness service? So that was the general idea we went in with. Once we'd sort of all agreed on that, we then started to take that into the department and do Gemba walks, and really try and do sort of mini PDSA cycles. So implementing this on the shop floor, would it work? What would we need to change? Next slide, please. There's just a few photos here from the time when we were trying to implement this. It was really good to do this on the shop floor, because what we saw quite quickly was that we kind of missed things out from our proposed process, which, you know, there were only a small number of people on that improvement week. So it's really important to go out on the Gemba, speak to all staff. We were getting lots of suggestions, lots of questions, things like, well, there's not enough equipment, or staff are having to go in, speak to a patient and then find a computer to type it up. So things like, we were able to bring laptops into every cubicle. The RPIW week really gave us the tools that if we wanted to make these changes happen quickly, that we were able to do that. So we had contacts in IT, contacts in radiology, and that was really important to make sure we could get the best out of these trials. Next slide, please. So this these photos here you're seeing is something that we picked up during the first couple of days of us trialing this process. So our cubicle spaces weren't suitable for the new process. So there's just a picture of here of what we did to ensure that we had all the equipment and tools we needed in place for our clinical teams to go and see the patient. So even, you know, trying to them having to go out to find bandages or to go and find thermometers, if we put all that next to the cubicles, that could really improve this. Sorry, Kate, Manu's just messaged me to say he's in the lobby.
No worries. Vicky, are you okay to let him in, please?
Thank you. Next slide, please. And then also during the week, we had the visits from our exec colleagues. So Jenny in the red jacket there, she's our director for HR. So that was just good to get some feedback from our executive colleagues and get the support from them. Next slide, please. So what does this future state look like? So if we remember before what this looked like and how, you know, complicated that was, the new process for patients that we got to was that patients would still come in and get their observations taken and an ECG if required, to ensure that we've still got the element of patient safety. And then at further assessment, patients would be seen by an assessment nurse and a junior doctor, so that they could have a full assessment and that their investigations and any tests were ordered at that point. Once that came back, the results would be reviewed by the same doctor who'd seen them in assessment. So you're still having one doctor for your entire journey. And then you would, a decision made on a discharge or a TCI home. Next slide, please. So obviously during this trial, it was also really important for us to get that staff feedback and also to get patient feedback. So what you see here is just a little bit of our staff feedback that we got. So the staff found it really positive, actually. What they found was that we didn't have collaborative working before, if I'm honest, between our medical and nursing colleagues. It was very much two separate teams, and what this did was really brought that collaboration back together and also empowered the staff to be able to make their own treatment plans and discuss ideas. And what we also saw, there's a lot of patients were being discharged very early in the journey. So one doctor said there that he discharged someone after an hour and 19 minutes because no further tests were needed, whereas previously a nurse would have requested a test and then the doctor would have to wait until that's back. Next slide, please. So we also got some patient feedback. So this is a good one from the patients that we received. So what they said was, you can see it's fantastic to see the doctor and nurse clearly working together. Why has it not always happened like this? So really good feedback from our patients on the process. Next slide, please. So some of the lessons learned that we got over the week is that, you know, we did I think that working together during that rapid improvement week for me, and Manu's here now, so I'm sure he will agree, is understanding the sort of pressures and the worries about staff from other staff groups. We never really had that before, and I think that was really helpful to the whole team into suggesting new ideas. One of the biggest challenges that, you know, we had, and when I go on to where we are now, I think we still have, is changing the way of things that we have always done. So why are we changing it now? Why are we trying new things? I think it's just moving away from that acceptance that we do things just because it is the way that it's always done. And I think there was the feedback from the team is that, you know, if we even start to make small changes in these process steps, that can have a huge impact on the overall journey for our patients. Next step, please. So this is the target progress report, which is updated following the rapid improvement week. So what we did, in the same way as we did for the baseline and the target, every day we went into the department and undertook the Gemba and undertook trials. We measured that for patient journey. So what you can see, so on the first day we went out, we got that down slightly to 4 hours 15 minutes. Once we tweaked it a little bit, we got it down to 2 hours 4 minutes, and by the end of the week we were able to reduce the lead time for patients in the RAU team to 1 hour 25 minutes, so well within our sponsor time of 2 hours. We also had staff and patient satisfaction was increased, and the quality defect time was actually 0, so another improvement. Next slide, please. So following the rapid improvement week, I think, so myself, Manu, and Jane, who is the matron, we all agreed that it was really important that we didn't lose the momentum of this, because it's very easy to have your week, improve it, and then just let it go. So we all agreed that we really wanted to push this, and so we agreed a further 2 trial days, with a final implementation date of the 9th of January. Unfortunately, we weren't able to implement that sooner due to the doctor strikes and Christmas, but we did try and do this for full days at a time. So at 30 days, so a part of the KPO, what we do is we report out at 30, 60 and 90 days. And this graph shows that after 30 days, we are still doing this new process, and we've been able to maintain a 1 hour 54 turnaround time for patients. So still within our sponsor challenge, which is really good. And sorry, next slide. Just the last page, really. So our overall sort of thoughts on this whole process. So what went well, so patients' wait time is reduced. We know that because we have monitored patients' time through the department. Patients are receiving the right treatment in the right place at the right time, and as a result we did see an increase in our emergency care standard score. So I think we had a full week of 80% ECS, which is we haven't done that. I've been here for 5 years and we haven't done that. So what would we do differently? So there are a few things. So staff communication about the changes. So we did really try and get the communication out there. So we sent emails to people individually. We put up posters. I think if we to do our time again, we might try different methods, but it's really important that every single member of the team, from consultants to porters, understand these changes and the improvements that are taking place. We would also factor in about how we could adapt the process to this changing operational pressures, because what we're seeing now is you come in at 8 o'clock and the position is quite good. So you start doing the process, all of a sudden 30 people turn up within 1 hour at 11 o'clock. We really start to struggle then. And then what we get is some people saying, let's revert it back to the old way. And we're really keen that there isn't an old way and a new way. So it's just about how we can continue, especially during our January winter pressures, and using this, so our demand versus capacity work. So how many people are arriving in the department versus the number of people we actually have to see them. So that's probably a little bit more work that we have to do. So what we're going to focus on for the next 30 days, so we are going to reintroduce our nurse-led pathways. I think during this we sort of didn't really appreciate that there were a number of nurse-led pathways. So whilst we brought in the clinician to that further assessment, we taken away some of that assessment nurse skill set, and our nurses could actually discharge patients directly from the front door themselves. So we've reintroduced those nurse-led pathways into that team so that patients aren't waiting unnecessarily to see a doctor. We're also looking at our senior decision maker allocation. So the feedback that we've got from our junior doctors is that it's really important that there is a senior decision maker there to support them at the early stage with the treatment plans that they are implementing. So we are looking at the allocation of staff that we have, and clinician to patient ratio. So really having a look at our responsibilities of staff and the expectation about the way things work. And I think this again comes into, have we just been accepting that this is how it is, and can we really start to challenge some of those roles and behaviours that we currently have in the department. So sorry, Manu's here now. I don't know if you want to say anything else, Manu, because I've just been talking through it, but thank you everybody.
Thank you so much, Tara. Yeah, Manu, we've probably got a minute or so. Is there anything you'd like to add? And also, welcome. Hello.
Hello, welcome. Sorry if IT issues meant I came in late.
No worries.
On the whole, fantastic journey. Thank you, Tara, for presenting. The one big thing take home is we made plans as though we did estimate patients are different. We did estimate clinicians function differently and work rate would be different, but our estimation was very conservative. When it came to reality, the difference was slightly much more. So that's what threw much more challenges. The biggest thing we learned is we need more clinicians at the front door to make this process work. And we are putting steps in place to address that. And there was a question on the chart about non-admitted, admitted. I will say the entire performance of the department got better. We were running around 60%. It's moved about 75, 76%. Non-admitted patient jump was about 25%, whereas we look at it as a whole department. Because the idea is a decongested department. It's best for the all the patients in the department. That's what's more important.
Brilliant. Thank you, Manu. And there's been lots of affirmation, I suppose, for all of your work in the chat. I think people are really impressed by it. There's a few questions we haven't had a chance to come to, so we might follow up with you, Tara, if that's okay, and get your responses to those questions so we can share them back with everyone. Thank you both so much. So we're moving into the last kind of 8 or 9 minutes of our visit today. Vicky, shall I hand over to you to do some kind of summing up and next steps?
Yes. Oh, I had a message to unmute myself and I'd already done it.
No, you're here. You're here. We can see you and hear you.
Well, thank you to all of the speakers. I've got a few closing bits to do. I'm going to come to Jimmy in a moment to ask him what he'd like to, any final comments on what he's taking away or he hopes you'll take away. The socio-technical opening bit just feels so real to me now, having heard all of this. I've heard so much about the human side of it and values, and so much that is so super practical as well. And I've also loved seeing how busy the chat's been, and how much the little microphones are going when you were in your breakout rooms. Clearly, you know, you're all really interested in this, and yeah, so thank you for being so involved, coming along. We hope it's been helpful. We'd like you all to share one thing that you're taking away. And I know one thing, I mean, there's so much, but a thing that you're taking away that you'd like to share in the chat. If you could do that, and then I'm going to give everyone a minute, and then I'll ask you to come in, Jimmy. We will also be asking you all for more substantial feedback on the session in a moment. And so, Kate, I wonder if you could be ready for once we've heard from Jimmy to share. Yeah. It's really valuable for us to get feedback on these sessions, on these visits. So as some more of that's coming in, Jimmy, could I ask you, I mean, either one thing that you're taking away or that you hope will stick with people from this visit?
Yeah, it is a difficult question. So I guess it's a thank you for people for engaging with the call. Obviously, I'm really hopeful there are some take-homes from that. I think it's really useful to be able to speak and hear from colleagues, both in the chat and in some of the breakout rooms, about we're doing all right. You know, sometimes you're in your own little world, and it's great to get that feedback from others that there's interest in what you're doing, and maybe the opportunity to share that more broadly. But tough to take a single thing. I think the follow-up for me is just prompted by some of the chat around Tara's presentation, actually, particularly from Tom Rose. So I'm going to follow that up in terms of understanding different perspectives on how we might measure our improvement. But yeah, thanks to everyone for joining. I hope it was valuable.